So welcome to Stoke-on-Trent 100 Voices of the City, a collaborative celebration brought to you by Stoke-on-Trent City Council, University of Staffordshire and Cross Rhythms Radio. So this year marks a monumental milestone as we celebrate 100 years since Stoke-on-Trent became a city. A centenary that highlights our rich heritage, vibrant culture and the incredible people that make our city extraordinary. And I'm sat with one of them today. She's an actor, playwright, honorary doctor at University of Staffordshire and an honorary Stokey. It's Deb McAndrew. Welcome.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me.
Super. So, Deb, let's get right into it and let's tell us about the path that led you to Stoke-on-Trent.
Well, myself and my husband Conrad Nelson were living in South East London in 2001 and our daughter had just been born. And I didn't want to stay in London. My family were in Yorkshire, Con's family were on the Wirral. He was touring, and in the first sort of 6 months of Liz's life, it was quite difficult to get back from touring, and we need to live somewhere more central. And we toured to the New Vic Theatre here in Newcastle under Lyme, Stoke, and we saw this house basically, and it was a bit of a whirl. We put our house on the market, we put an offer in. I'm afraid I'm a bit of a girl about remembering dates. So it was the 15th of. We viewed the house on the 15th of May and we moved in on the 31st of July.
Wow,
it was
quick.
And when you say, act in haste, repent at leisure. It was absolutely that, really. We moved into this big old house and it turned out, we thought we'd have a bigger family, but we didn't. We just had Liz. And so it was a bit of a strange sort of 3 years, really. The first 3 years were really strange. We were in Newcastle under Lyme. Yeah. Didn't know anything about Stoke, really. And but when you've got a young baby and you're on your own and obviously I'd stopped acting, pretty much, and I was focusing on writing because that was kind of the way that I was focusing my working life and career. But I had a young baby, I had some health problems going on. There was all sorts going on in that sort of swirl of that 3 years. But when you've got a child, you have to get out, So I just would throw her in the pram and just walk miles to different groups and, mums and toddlers and all the things that you do, and you meet people. And then gradually I got curious really about this place, sort of the other side of the D road almost. Most of it's on the other side of the D road. Understood that, got to learn about the D road and I just found, where are these 6 towns? How amazing. And I started sort of looking for them and talking to people. And because in 2001 and sort of in that period, it was only sort of 4 or 5 years since I'd been in Coronation Street. So it was quite recent and I still did look, obviously ancient and haggard now, but I was quite young and fresh then. And people still recognise me. They still recognise my voice. My Yorkshire accent sort of stands out. And I was really baffled because people would say to me, "What are you doing here? Why would someone who'd been on telly and had some choices, seemingly, was rich and famous, neither of which I was, but you know what I mean? That sort of perception." Why would they want to be in Stoke? And I remember really sort of viscerally thinking, what's wrong with it? I don't understand this lack of confidence because apart from anything else, I come from Yorkshire, obviously, specifically Leeds. And you would never hear anybody in Leeds say that Leeds was a dump. Yeah. Because they don't understand why anybody needs to go to Bradford. Never mind anyway. You know what I mean? Like, it's really, they're so proud. And all my family were like that about Leeds and still are. And also, but, Yorkshire as well, there's this great confidence and pride, not just in the kind of people who are well off and doing very nicely, thank you, but everybody. Yeah. Or a lot of people feel like that. There are poor and run-down places absolutely everywhere. And in fact, the bigger the city, the more problems. And you get that great contrast between the very rich and very poor in those big cities, which you don't get here, actually, The
pride thing's interesting. Do you think that's changed over the years?
I think it has changed quite a lot. Although, even in my time here, I've seen some things come up and I've seen other things in decline, So I understand the bereavement that people feel for the industry, and I really started to get my head into that and really wanted to understand what the city was all about. And it was so... I'm an actor. I've been touring the British Isles, particularly England, for years, and I've visited a lot of cities. Yeah. And Stoke-on-Trent is not like anywhere else. And I get a bit twitchy because I was at a meeting a long time ago and somebody from this sort of some big shot somewhere was going, look, forget it, Stoke. You're not unique. Everybody thinks they're unique. So stop thinking like that. And I wanted to scream at him, you've got no idea of how this city works. It's so different to everywhere else.
Yeah.
You know, this polycentric city, linear city down the line. The way that those brutal roads, the D road and the A50, ploughed their way through communities in the 1970s and 80s. You know, the story, the scarring on the city, the loss of industry, not one industry, but three, really, and the communities and everything. But somehow the character that's formed on the factory floor, the accent, which I think is a very industrial accent, particularly with the loss of the connectives. You know, you don't go too Hanley, you go Hanley. Yeah. And I think that's because when you're shouting across a loud factory to somebody, you only need the nouns and the verbs. You don't need anything else. Yeah. So it's and I think that's really interesting. And I just started to find I love place. I like place and what it means, and I love people. And I just started to find the city endlessly fascinating, and the people, the heritage, the geography, the topography, the geology, which is what it's all built on. You know, the waterways, and then. You know, and I'm becoming an advocate for it, really, and then hearing the stories which started to inform my work. As you fell in love with the
place, that presumably made you want to tell the stories of the place that you were falling in love with.
Totally.
So what was the first one where you thought that deserves a wider audience? That particular part or aspect of Stoke-on-Trent needs to be in a theatre setting?
Well, I was working quite consistently as a writer by the sort of by 2010, 2009, and I'd got a number of different plays in development, and I didn't feel like I'd got a right to write about Stoke because I'm not from here, I'm not of here. You know, we've got a lot of there's a lot of politics around identity and who's got the right to tell what stories and all that now, and I think that's quite right, and I think we should always challenge ourselves about whose story are we telling and is that all right? But I also think that writers can tell any stories they want because actually writers are writers and people are people. But I saw a play at the New Vic called A Nightingale Sang, and it was about the North East in the war. And I only discovered, sort of when I went to see it, that it was written by a Russian Glaswegian who'd moved to the area.
There can't be many of them.
Yeah, exactly. And it was a real kind of sort of light bulb moment, really, when I went, I can write about Stoke if I want, because this beautiful play, which really found the heart of these people in this place in the Northeast, was not written by someone of that place. And sometimes the outsider can have a perspective, I think. And I was really curious. There was a lot of stirrings around the city at that time. There was British National Party were on the council, which was quite disturbing and worrying. But instead of being all judgy about that, I thought, what's going on here? What's underneath? Why? How does that mechanism happen?
Yeah.
And I wrote a play called Ugly Duck, and it was, I don't know. I was switching. The creative process can sound a bit mysterious, and I don't want to sound pretentious. So I saw this vision really in my head of a naked man in a Port Vale hat, and it was because
was that a particular fever dream, or
it was a bit of a fever dream. It's like when you strip it back. I suppose I was thinking about getting back to the core of it, and I felt like it was a man. I felt like he was a football fan, and at the time, Stoke were really riding high, and so it didn't feel like he would be a Stoke City fan. He felt like he would be a Port Vale fan. Not that I'm not a massive football watcher really, but I understood that he wouldn't be the Premiership guy. He would be the other guy,
and not the glamorous, not the big, just every Saturday 3:00 pie and chips,
heading up Moreland Road and over. So I think, and so he was and he was called Derek. No, he wasn't. He was called Dennis. He was called Dennis and. Dennis Hancock, very local name, and he was in a studio and he was being painted. So he was an artist's life model, and gradually the story starts to come, and there was a lot of stuff about Eastern Europeans, and so the play was kind of exploring race and exploring right wing radicalism, but not. Colour didn't feel to be about it. It felt to be about Eastern Europeans, actually. And so I had a Polish plumber in there, and he got some money, and, there's poor Dennis who's gotten out, and it was about the restorative power of art. It was about a journey, a man going on a journey. And actually, he wasn't fundamentally the radical one. His 21-year-old son was the one that was being potentially radicalised on the right there. And that's, there was kind of a off-stage thing going on, really, that was feeding into this pop bank with these fussy parents and this young artist who was a bit of a split personality, trying to find her voice, trying to find her, not her voice, that's my art form, trying to find her form and her style and everything. And she just becomes kind of fixed on this
So
Stokey
when
man.
you were telling people that that's what you were doing, that's what you were putting on, this is the story you're going to tell. It's going to be in Stoke-on-Trent. What was the initial reaction?
Well, initially, I'd written this play and I'd developed it through a writing festival in Birmingham. And it was about Stoke. I didn't think I would produce it. I'd never produced a play in my life. I was just a writer and a director and an actor. There was nobody interested in putting it on. I'd obviously sent it to the Vic. They weren't interested in it, although they did subsequently do it, actually. But at that point, they weren't interested. It didn't fit with whatever they were planning. And quite a few people by then had read the play, including Kath Ralph, who was the chief exec of the School of Art at that point in Burslem. And people believed in the play. You know, they liked the play and they said, get some money, Deb, put it on yourself. Yeah. Now, we had some background, me and Colin, doing found space work with a company called Northern Broadsides that we'd worked with for 25, 30 years. So working in non-theatre spaces was fine for us. And so let's put it on in the School of Art. So I applied to the Arts Council as an individual for money to do it. And as a first-time applicant, you could apply. As an individual, you could apply for up to £30,000, and I applied for 26, which was a lot for a first-time applicant. But my reasoning has always been, if I can't do it right, I don't want to do it. There's no point in doing something that's sort of half-baked or a bit average, or
don't do it with low ambitions.
Ambitions. I want to employ a designer. I want to employ brilliant actors, and we did. But so the first thing when people said was, "You won't get the money." You know, for a first-time applicant, £5,000. You know, that's what you get. That's what you get. And I said, well, I don't want to get £5,000. I either want 26 or I'm not doing it, because I need to pay people properly and do it properly. And Kath Ralph was great help to me in doing that, and she has subsequently became the chair of the board of the company that became after that, and still is. And so I got the money. So then, of course, people are saying, well, you do know that nobody will come. Because what you're doing is this holy trinity of things they tell you not to do in the theatre, which is a new play. Because anybody in the theatre will say, oh, new plays don't sell. A new play in a non-theatre space, so a place nobody knows is a theatre, in Stoke-on-Trent, where nobody engages with the arts. You know, so that was kind of nobody will come. And they did. I mean, I don't know why. I mean, obviously, you know, there was
lots
of
Field of Dreams moment.
If you build it, they will come. And I did have a belief that if you could just get the message out, if you could just speak to people. And I think by then I'd got my contacts. You know, I was in touch with, you know, local radio and local people. I've been living in the area and really, really taking an interest and talking and getting plugged into the city for 10 years by then. More. This was 2013, so we've been here 12 years by then. I knew my way around. I understood the people. And I think I knew how to, at least reasonably successfully, speak to people. Posters, chatting in the chip shop, all that. I mean, absolutely. Feet on the ground. We've always been boots on the ground, and that's still how we do it. And they came, and we couldn't get everyone in. You know, we had a returns list, and we've always had a returns list on every show. Did you think
did you know then the success it was going to go on to be and to grow and to be Clay Body Theatre?
Absolutely not. I'd got this idea that I wanted to call the company Fine Frenzy, which is very pretentious, but it's a line from A Midsummer Night's Dream when I think it's Theseus talks about the poet's eye in a fine frenzy. I think it's Theseus. Anyway, it's a line, and the poet's eye, the writer, has a fine frenzy. You know, to create something. And I thought, well, that'd be a good name for a theatre company. And then I found out some students from Nottingham had beat me to it. And so I didn't. And then I thought, I don't know what to call it. And again, because I was sort of thinking about the ceramics history and I was always plugged into that, I literally woke up one morning or had a dream in the night or something and wrote it down on my pad at the side, Clay Body. And actually, at that point, Clay Body Theatre didn't exist. It was just a collective name because I was the producer, but I didn't want to be Deb McAndrew Productions. First of all, that's for the birds, but also it sounds commercial and it sounds like it's not of the place, and that was not what I wanted to achieve. So there was one play going on, Clay Body Theatre, and that describe the collective of artists and people who were making the show. And that was it. And we were going to stop. It was just going to be this one show. Never, ever thought there would be more. And actually, it took 2-3 years for it to get, because, of course, people came, what are you doing now?
Yeah. Like always, what's next?
Yeah, what's next? And the New Vic picked it up then, and we redirected it the following year for the round. So Ugly Duck was on in 2013. It went to the Capitol Theatre Festival in Birmingham as well as a little tour, tiny little kind of transfer for 3 or 4 performances. And then following year, 2014, it was on at the Vic, so a lot more people saw it then.
But you've always been really passionate about that concept of the non-traditional theatre spaces. Why was that so important? And how did you find those spaces, and where were they?
The spaces have been really hard to find and always have been, because people are always saying to me, there's loads of empty buildings in Stoke-on-Trent. I say, yes, are they big enough? Are they accessible? Have they got a toilet? There's some real red lines there in terms of using spaces. And actually, it's been quite difficult. We went and Spode 3 times in sort of 17, 18, 19. We've performed in schools, obviously, the Burslem School of Art, Fenton Town Hall, and it's difficult working in them, but the beauty of those spaces is the meaning and the resonance that they have for the communities that come.
So it makes the pain of putting it on in a space that's not built for theatre worth it when you see how much it gives to the
It really does. And also, there are people who come see our shows who couldn't cross the threshold of a theatre. They wouldn't feel culturally
Do you think that's still a barrier in Stoke-on-Trent? If you were to say, I'm putting on this play, it's going to be about this, it's going to be at this theatre, you find people more likely to say, we're doing this at Fenton Town Hall, and they'll be like curious and come along and engage in something that they perhaps wouldn't have been on the radar before.
Yeah, I think there's a critical minority that you can only reach like that. They'll never come to the theatre if it's called a theatre and it looks like a theatre. And it's, and I know I get it, because, when I go down London and I walk along the South Bank past the National Theatre, I sort of feel like it's not quite my space, even though I have been in the theatre. I've worked in the theatre for 35 years. Yeah. Certain spaces don't feel quite like mine, or quite like I belong there. And so I understand why someone who's not had any kind of cultural capital given to them as a child or as a young person, why they would feel uncomfortable, So, the found space thing is really important. People walk into our permanent found space performance space theatre. It is a theatre, the Dipping House in Spode, and they touch the walls, and it smells like a pot bank. And so many people in the city have connections to that site.
They've got memories of something else in that space, and it's
absolutely. It's really, and it's not just the older generation. Young people like funky spaces as well. Theatre feels a bit stiff for them, a bit straight. Whereas
a GCSE drama,
a bit GCSE, like something you go for school. Whereas they'll come to again a space that it sort of has that broad appeal. Older people with those memories of the heritage, and younger people who are looking for a different kind of experience, I think. Though, for me, as a theatre maker, a purpose-built, beautiful theatre with all the facility where you can just do stuff is a dream. But no, the found space thing. And because then it becomes about the story. You can do some tech. I mean, we've done, Bright Lights Over Bentley. We've done science fiction in a shed with a plug, basically. and it was fine, and it had enough tech to do it. But actually, what draws you in, it has to be about the storytelling. It has to be about the characters. It has to be about the writing and the performances. Are really the most important thing. And that, for me, obviously, as a writer and an actor, the essence of theatre is a story.
Yeah. I think for me, what's great about Claybody is not just the community spirit that you've captured and the sort of the passion for theatre that you awaken within Stoke-on-Trent. It's the fact that you're bringing so many other perspectives from outside of the area to the city. So we've had phenomenal reviews and things like The Guardian, for example. And so when you meet these critics, if you get a chance to meet them, or if you hear their sort of reactions after, what are they telling you about Stoke-on-Trent?
I think they're pleasantly surprised. I think, critics, and I think about, people who've covered our work, they tend to be interested, they're interested in in something that's a bit different or that's traditional. And I think also certainly some people on the writing folk. I mean, Claire Brennan, who writes for The Observer, is a really good example of somebody who really gets it, what the Arts Council want to achieve with the Let's Create 10-year plan and strategy for bringing arts, making sure that arts is accessible. This is public money, and we need to make sure that every single person in the country is somehow getting a little bit of that, whatever it is, or a lot of it, hopefully. Then they do get it. Charlotte Higgins, she gets it. Clive Davis, is that right? Yeah, he writes for the Times. Great Arnold Bennett fan. There's some Samira Ahmed's another one. She's a great Bennett fan. These critics that they do understand what we're trying to achieve and they want to support and reviewers.
And then you get people from Stoke-on-Trent saying, I saw us we've got to mention The Guardian, Is that sense of fostering pride in the area as well that you're doing by telling the real stories of, people in the area?
Yeah, I hope so. And the national thing does, it matters on lots of levels, but actually when it boils down to it, the thing that I get my kicks out of really are those moments in the room, in the performances, with the audience, meeting the work. And I always say this, the work, the play doesn't happen on the stage, it happens in the minds of everybody sitting there. And they all bring something new. People are always coming up to me afterwards telling me what my plays are about. And and that's wonderful because it belongs to them, and whatever they made of it in their mind and in their hearts, that's what the play's about. And that's where the authentic and true experience happens. And that's where the change really happens. That's where the alchemy occurs, And there is lots of pride and attention from, media and outside. And that's very good. But yeah.
And of course, you've also taken theatre into schools as well. So tell us a little bit about that and what that involves.
Well, the first thing that we did in school was quite a long time ago. It was about the miners' strike, and it was a commission from the North Staffordshire Miners' Wives. And I said, well, what do you want to achieve with this play? And we did a bit of old-fashioned TIE, really. And it was almost a verbatim play. I interviewed dozens of people who'd been involved, who'd been kids during the strike because it was going into primary schools, and so told the story and made it a fictional thing then and fictionalised it. But most of the stories that were in the play that made up the play were real. In fact, all but one. I cheated one little moment just to get a bit of dramatic tension when it needed it. And that toured the former mining areas back in 2015, and we work in schools in all kinds of different ways. We with colleges and things, but a lovely project that we did sort of finished a year or so ago, was making audio drama with children, because we've got a lot of experience with audio drama as actors as well. And making audio drama with children because it's a great leveller. So with nothing, we started from nothing, and in I think it was 6 schools across the city, we made audio from scratch. And a BBC engineer who works with us on all the projects, he came in and recorded the children. We had a makeshift studio sort of set up where we had like a dead space, where we could add stuff in post, a little bit of spot effects, and they were playing characters that they'd created. And it needed a lot of shape and it needed a lot of guide, but they owned that work, and that was really great, because the kids who you don't expect always, they're the ones that step up, and also because you can't be seen on radio. Actors, all actors, famous actors, big stars love doing radio because you don't have to learn it and you don't have to dress up. So we just turn up in our jeans.
It's far more relaxed.
And you've got the script in front of you and you just make it come alive, and it's a delightful medium to work in. And when you work in that medium with children, they are similarly liberated because they're not on show. And so it's a really different kind of it's a different experience, and children can find confidence in that medium they wouldn't necessarily have. So we love that project.
Amazing. Now we're all about the centenary of Stoke-on-Trent, so let's go to some very specific Stoke-on-Trent questions. So to you, an honorary Stokey, somebody that I think is very much a Stoke-on-Trent person now, what to you makes a Stokey?
Ooh, what makes a Stokey? Okay, I think essentially a person from Stoke-on-Trent is is someone of what you would call working class, not necessarily, industrial, particularly as obviously there's not much industry left. But yes, somebody who's not, and class is a difficult thing to define now. I mean, I don't know where I belong really. I'm educated. I eat olives, hummus. What does that? What does that mean? I drink wine. I like good whiskey. That probably makes me middle class. I've got umpteen degrees or whatever. But fundamentally, I clean my own toilet. And there's something kind of,
the bar?
It's sort of the bar, yeah. I don't have a cleaner. There's something quite sort of, it's a cultural thing. It's a mindset.
Yeah.
And
there could be some good aspects to that mindset, and also some perhaps not negative, but that thing that you mentioned at the beginning about being quite down about ourselves sometimes.
I think Stokies can be, but there's also it's because as a writer, as an artist, what interests me more than anything are contradictions, paradoxes, things that sit side by side that are uncomfortable and where there is jarring things, because that's the grit in the oyster. That's what's interesting. It's a gritty place, Stoke, but it's not that hard. If you go to Manchester or some of the streets of the big cities, they're much harder.
Yeah.
It's not a well off place here, and it's a bit, but for the most part, it's not that. It's not that rough, really. People think it's rough, and there are bits. Of course, there are bits where I wouldn't walk at night, of course.
Yeah.
But that's the same anywhere. But when you go to a big city, you just feel a different level of threat and edge to it, which I don't think.
Maybe it's part of the Six Towns thing. Maybe it's part of the fact that we've got these very unique communities all together.
Yeah, perhaps so. And I also think it's because it's quite an old-fashioned place still, in a good way. But it's and I think aspiration is an interesting kind of concept really as well, because for me, aspiration, people describe aspiration, it's always going upwards, and my aspiration goes outwards.
Yeah.
And I think that's how communities work, actually. It's like, how can we make it better that way, and how can I move in that sphere rather than lifting out and above everyone else? It doesn't quite work for me in my mindset. But Stokey is, and they're funny, and they're dry, and they don't mince words, which is it's a very Yorkshire thing. But I think they're not as flat and dry as Yorkshire people, by and large. I'm not. Yorkshire people are all kinds of different things. You've got caricatures of people, haven't you? And there's something about, and it is the way people speak, I think, which characterises them so well. And that Stokey sort of sing-song. There's a musicality to the Stoke accent, which is funny and has a wit all of its own, which I love. There's a straightness and a simplicity in a good way. I don't mean simple. There's a kind of clarity of
everything you've experienced since you've been here, what to you is the best thing about Stoke-on-Trent? I'm putting you on the spot.
Oh, that's impossible. Because automatically you would always say the people, but because the people embody all the other stuff, really, which is the strange civic structure, the industrial heritage, the geography of the place, the marlows, the mines, and the wit and the. There's a lovely. I can't remember where I was. Somebody told me they were walking through town somewhere, and there was some teenagers walking. One was going a bit fast, and the other was saying, "Hey, slow down, duck. It's not America," And it sort of kind of sums it up a little bit. It's like we're here. We don't have to rush.
That's a cracking accent.
Yeah, we're not America. And it's I think it is the people, but it's because the people are full, and people who've come in as well, and people who obviously it's quite diverse places, people with different cultures now, with different cultural backgrounds. But I know quite a lot of Sikh Stokies, and they're Stokey and they're Sikh. The people. There's people who are Caribbean and Stokey.
Yeah.
And they really are fully.
So they've still got the culture, their heritage, their accent, and they've got a duck on the end.
Yeah, absolutely. or they have, full-on Stokey accent, absolutely born and bred here, but with a cultural root that goes back to somewhere else. And actually, it's interesting, and it does say to me that really where you're born and where you grow up and what you hear. Because our daughter was born in Leeds, actually, and was briefly lived in London, but she's a Staffordshire girl, a turn of phrase and a way of thinking, and she's very Stoke-on-Trent, very Staffordshire. And I think fundamentally, if you dug down in me, I'm still from Yorkshire. I am still got that Leeds thing right at the bottom of me, and my husband's a Liverpudlian, and we are where we grow. But I also think, you bloom where you're planted. We washed up here 20 years ago and just went, right, this is where we are. Let's make it beautiful.
Go all in.
Yeah, I'm all in.
So if somebody was visiting you for the first time, visiting Stoke-on-Trent for the first time, where would you take them?
Well, I think if it was in the summertime, I would show off all the green spaces, because I think that would begin to undermine.
Well, we are one of the greenest cities in the UK.
The fourth greenest city in the UK. And there are some... and again, it's because of this weird civic structure. There are 5 civic parks. Only Stoke doesn't have one. Beautiful parks. I can't tell you which is my favourite, really, because I love Queen's Park in Longton. I love Hanley Park. Bursland Park's lovely. Tunstall is gorgeous. And Fenton is just... wow, Fenton Park going up to Fen Park and over Berry Hill and Berry Hill Fields, and wow, they're wonderful, wonderful places to go. And they're just the parks. And then there's all the reclaimed spaces. That's before you get the canals. That's before you get to all the reclaimed spaces like Forest Hill Park, all those wonderful spaces that were Western Coiney. What's it called? Park Hall. Fantastic places to walk your dog. Fantastic place to walk your dog. Obviously, I love my dog. So just look at these green spaces. Wowee, amazing. Not what you expect from a dirty industrial city. And so, that would be my first thing. I would go, right, well, let's take 2 weeks
and visit every single park.
Walk the green spaces and the parks and the allotments. Obviously, I still think we're the 3rd highest provider of allotments in the country, second only to Birmingham and Bristol. Wonderful allotment spaces as well, and all the greenways, and it's Chatsky Whitfield. Come on, Chatsky Whitfield. There's so many. It's too many. Fort Green Hall, Westport Lake. It's just Smith's Pool, lovely little gem in the middle of Fenton. Not everybody knows that's there.
So although we've got the roaches and the Staffordshire Moors on our doorstep, we've also got it right here in the heart of the city as well. Right here in the heart of the city.
If you driving around Stoke in July, it's so green, so green.
So next question: complete the following sentence. Stoke-on-Trent is more than.
Stoke-on-Trent is more than. I think Stoke-on-Trent is more than you'd ever imagine. I think all perception that people have from the outside is wrong. It's just wrong. It's just narrow, shallow, stereotypical, untrue.
Sort of row of terraced houses with a smoking chimney and
and that it's dirty and that it's run down and that it's poor and that the people are uneducated and stupid and unhealthy, and we all know what the data is, but data is one thing, and it describes certain groups and certain types, but overall it's not. I've spent a lot of time up on Bentley, which is a byword even in the city for kind of all the sort of problems. Fabulous place, fabulous people. Most people, just families, just normal people, just getting on with their lives, trying to, look after their families, look after their neighbours, and you get a couple of bad roads or one or two. People don't have a lot necessarily in a lot of places here, but that doesn't mean they're not rich in other ways, and that they haven't got stories to tell, and they haven't got good jokes to tell me.
Because can't go without the jokes.
Yeah.
So speaking of sort of jokes and fun, you brought something in with you today. So we've got a little feature called Cop Out of That, which roughly translates into grab a hold of that.
It's okay.
So you've got an item with you.
I have.
So
I've got it here.
if you'd like to show it up for the camera, but also for the benefit of those listening, just describe what you brought in for us
So
today,
what I
Deb.
have brought in, and it's actually it's sort of a bit stained. It's for the apologies to the Potters fans. It is a Port Vale hat from 12 years ago.
Wow, okay. In good condition.
It's actually, don't look too closely. It's quite a mess. It's the hat that Dennis Hancock wore in Ugly Duck, and so it's a prop, really. It's a piece of costume.
It's kind of where it all started.
It's where the company started with this vision of a man in a Port Vale hat, and what was really wonderful about it was, obviously there was a moment in the play when wonderful Phil Wright, fantastic actor called Philip Wright, was wearing nothing but this, which was quite something, and especially in the round when we did it at the Vic. But yeah, you know, people came to see the show at the Vic when they hadn't been able to see it at the School of Art. Came to see it at the Vic, and there was people on the front row with their Vale hats on.
Oh, brilliant!
You know, they didn't come to the theatre, but it was a play about a Vale fan. You know, and actually, it was a play about a Stokey. Yeah. It was a play about a working class middle aged man who was so down on his luck and couldn't see a way out.
And how did it work out for him?
By the end of the play, he's not really. I mean, I'm not a Pollyanna. You know, his life wasn't really much better, but he was better.
Yeah.
He'd been on a big journey, and at the end of the play, the artist turns the work of art around to show him, and we commissioned Rob Poynton, local artist Rob Poynton. We commissioned him to paint the actor, a beautiful nude of the actor in a classical style with the Port Vale hat on, and also a little narrative thing of he had a foot phobia. Anyway, he's got a bandage around his foot as well. On this sort of red fabric. And he was actually sitting on top of an old pot mould with a red fabric over it. Because this play is set in an old pot bank, a disused pot bank. And when that was turned around in performance, and it worked better obviously in end on than in the round, but it still works in the round. When it was turned around or revealed, there was this moment in the audience of... Because he looks beautiful, and it's a beautiful painting, and Rob is a brilliant artist. And Dennis says, "Oh, you made me look all right." And she says to him, "You are all right."
Oh.
And it was like a love letter to Burzum, a love letter to Stoke-on-Trent. And to the people going, this play's made us look all right, and now wanted as the artist, you know, sort of in the kind of meta kind of idea of that, to go, "You are all right." I want to portray you because you're wonderful and interesting and complicated.
I love that. That's beautiful. So, as it says centenary, we're asking every guest this. So, to finish the episode, it would be great to hear what your one wish for Stoke-on-Trent is for the next 100 years. Oh. We're not making it easy for you.
Well, actually, do you know, I've had this thing, and I'm back to the green stories again, because it's a very important thing to me, but I would love to see... So the Industrial Revolution in the Midlands in England is where global warming begins, really. It's where climate change begins. You can track that and argue that the industries that started here in England that then spread across the world. I mean, obviously there was industrial revolutions popping up everywhere, but it's really the 18th century here is the cradle of the international industrial revolution. And Stoke was, maybe parts of the Black Country as well, but really dirty, really polluting, terribly polluting. You know, I always make the point to people who say, well, Bury and Blackburn were dirty. You know, I say, yeah, but you only need 100 degrees to get steam going to fire a mill. You need 1,000 degrees to fire a pot. So it's 10 times more polluting, 10 times the coal, 10 times the muck. And obviously all the industrial diseases that the people of Stoke-on-Trent suffered and died of very young, too early, horrible diseases. So I would like Stoke to own that and turn it round.
Okay.
And I would like the next 100 years to see that pivot and climb out to be the leader, the absolutely in the vanguard of green technologies, of making the world better for people, better for the planet, better for all the other species that share the planet with us. I'd love to see this dirty place, this cradle of the Industrial Revolution, be the one then that leads the next revolution and be part of that. So yeah, and that would take 100 years. Yeah, so let's
hope that does come true, because that would be amazing. Thank you very much, Deb McAndrew. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Thank you.